Yeah, no, that'd be great. But for now, we're gonna have to use the podium until I.
Testing 1 2. Yes.
Yes.
Elizabeth, do you want to start the same?
Andy Smith. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. This is one of 3, so we want to get as much information as we can today from Reverend, from Kevin Reed and Reverend Andy Smith, correct? So we want to give them a warm welcome for coming in today and answering all our questions that we might have. And just want to let everybody know that this is an informative meeting, so we're not here to persuade anybody, right, left, middle. Just answer all the questions that you might have, and if you're still unclear, we still have 2 more meetings that we're going to have. And we're not voting today, so don't have any anxiety attacks or anything like that. So we'll get started with a prayer.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's good to be with you. My name is Andy Smith. I am United Methodist elder, recently retired. I retired actually in July of 2022, and my retirement lasted 4.5 months. And Bishop Schnase asked me to come back and be the interim district superintendent of the Capital District. I've been serving as a district superintendent for 5 years prior to my retirement. And so I came back and I was the interim district superintendent here in the Capital District because I live here in Austin. I grew up in Austin, and so I did that for 7.5 months. And now our district superintendent is the Reverend Dr. Marcus Freeman, who was not able to be here today. But if you'll recall that we did an informational session a few months ago, and I was here to help go through some of what we're going to go through today, and to give some information at that time. And so anyway, my friend Marcus had asked me to give you his greetings. He's not here today because he's on his way to New Mexico for a cabinet retreat. The Rio, Texas cabinet is meeting jointly with the New Mexico cabinet because, you know, we share a bishop with the New Mexico conference. And so that's where Marcus is this week. That's why he couldn't be here today. Let's pray. God of grace and mercy, we are so humbled and blessed to be in your presence, in your house this day. Help us, Lord, to feel your presence and to know that you are our God and that our future is in your hands, just as our present and our past are in your hands. And so, Lord, I give thanks for these servants that are here today and pray your blessing upon.
Thank you, Andy. My name is Kevin Reed, and I'm not a pastor, but I am the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Rio, Texas Conference. And the Board of Trustees is the entity that is responsible for all of the assets of the conference. And in addition to that, we are very involved in the disaffiliation process, which we'll tell you more about in a minute. And my good friend David, who's in the back, is your representative and has served ably for many years on the Board of Trustees along with me. And so when he invited me to be here today, I was very happy to be able to do that and to talk to you. Andy and I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about a number of different things, but we also want to leave time at the end for your questions. Let me start out by saying I am so proud to stand in this church. This church has an extraordinary history in Austin, going back into when it was formed back in about 1890 or so, actually. And I was mentioning coming in, this building was actually designed by an extraordinarily famous architect, an architectural firm in Austin, and is one of the examples of postmodern architecture that's left in our community. So you sit in a place with an extraordinary history. I also love coincidences. Andy's father was the founding, I go to Northwest Hills, Andy's father was the founding pastor at Northwest Hills, and as Andy will tell you, as a child, he ran around that church. So, the connections that we all have to each other are really quite extraordinary. And I love that part, and I love that part of again, being here with you. So the first thing we wanted to do was to start out and talk to you a little bit about the history, how we got to where we are today. Quite honestly, I wish this wasn't true, but there's turmoil within the United Methodist Church right now. And that turmoil has come over the issue of same-sex marriage and the ordination of practicing individuals who practice same-sex relationships. And that has brought us to where we are today and to the division that we find ourselves in today. This actually, now some people would say that this goes back a long, long time, and it does go back a long, long time. The interesting thing is I see a number of you in the audience who will remember this. How many of you in the audience remember Anita Bryant? Can I see hand? Yeah, I see a number of. Well, if you will remember, during the 70s, Anita Bryant started really, the only way I can say this is an anti-gay crusade during the 1970s. She was a very, very vocal conservative, very anti-gay, and she really led a movement during the course of the 70s. Well, as a result of that, there was a wave of of advocates for gay rights, but then advocates on the very conservative side, and that filtered its way into the church. And in the 1970s, there was a general conference, and let me tell you again about a little history for those of you who don't know. We meet as a conference, and our conference is, you are in the Rio, Texas conference. And the Rio, Texas conference goes from Austin all the way to the Valley, all the way to San Angelo, halfway to Houston. We have currently about probably between 250 and 300 churches in the Rio, Texas conference. And we are part of that, and there are conferences like us really all over the country. And every year we meet as a conference, and some of you always send a delegate actually to that conference to participate in it. But then every 4 years, the general church comes together worldwide, and the church makes that general conference is what it's called. That general conference sets policy for the entire church. Well, back in it was 76, if I recall. In 1976, at the general conference, there was actually a study done that was to be presented to the general conference about human sexuality. And actually what that study did when it was originally presented to the conference was it basically said we accept all people in all ways. But that caused a ripple of dissent through the conference, and what actually came out of the conference was the language that's currently in the United Methodist discipline, that homosexuality is incompatible with the teachings of Christ. And so because of that, we don't ordain, we specifically do not do gay marriage, and we specifically do not ordain gay pastors. That has been what's in the discipline since 1976. That has been an issue at every 4 years, at every general conference since then, with concern about that language. And in a minute, I want Andy to speak to this. You know, to me, the interesting thing is that was never part of the United Methodist Church prior to 1976. It came in 1976. And it has been fought every 4 years since 1976, extraordinarily controversial language. And the interesting thing is that in the discipline, we have decided in the discipline to pick out one thing, and that happens to be gay individuals. We have picked them out, singled them out, and said, we will not marry you, and we will not ordain you as pastors. It doesn't say anything about thieves. It doesn't say anything about murders. It doesn't say anything about pedophiles. It doesn't say anything about adulterers. Literally, you can cheat on your spouse 10 times, and we'll still marry you in the United Methodist Church. But if you're in a long-term, supportive, same-sex relationship, we cannot. That is the oddity that we live in today. Now, coming up, and when I mention that, it is up to the individual pastor. Individual pastors make those decisions. So an individual pastor can certainly say no to marrying a thief or a murderer or whatever. But the discipline doesn't say anything at all about that. So we come up to the most recent general conference, and by the way, we have another one in 2024. We come up to the most recent general conference. There has been really, this issue has come to the point where it's impossible to go forward together, I guess is what I would say. And so we have begun to have a process of churches beginning to leave. We don't know what will happen in 2024. The discipline still says today that you can't marry in the Methodist Church. It still says that we do not ordain same-sex pastors. I think it's possible in 2024 that language will be dropped from the discipline, but nobody knows that. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 2024. But what has begun to happen is the more conservative churches have begun to say we're not willing to wait until 2024, and so we're going to go ahead and leave now, out of the anticipation that language would be dropped in the discipline at some point in the future, probably in 2024. But again, who knows? This is where we find ourselves. Andy, do you want to talk about the history anymore? Otherwise, I'll go into discerning pathways. Okay. So where we are in our conference today is the Board of Trustees has been responsible to put together a process for people who want to leave. And our desire is to put together what we call a graceful process. It is not our desire to fight with anybody. It is our desire to those people who do not believe they can continue in the United Methodist Church, it is our desire to send them off with grace in their faith journey and allow us to continue on in our faith journey. So the process is basically that you have a discernment process. I understand you've started the discernment process, and you have a series of meetings in the discernment process. You get to ask questions. You get to talk about kind of where the United Methodist Church is and where it's going. And ultimately, you have the right to make some kind of a decision if you want to stay or not stay. And that's a vote of the church. Now, it's also important for you to know that no church in the United Methodist Church has to vote. No church in the United Methodist Church has to have a discernment process. For example, my church right now, there's no plan to vote. We're not having a discernment process. We are waiting to see what happens in the General Conference in 2024. A couple of things. We think the discernment process is, as I said, a graceful process. One of the things I know I get questions sometimes about is what's the cost in the discernment process. And in the cost of the discernment process is that you have to pay 2 years of apportionments. You have to make sure that your insurance is all paid up because your insurance is paid through the conference. So it's 2 years of apportionments, your insurance is paid up, and you have a pension obligation. And the pension obligation is basically to take you out of the pension plan. You have been in a pension plan for the United Methodist Church for years and years and years. I can't imagine how far back it goes. And you've had, I don't know how many pastors appointed here. All of those pastors have been engaged in the pension process. And so when you leave, one of the things that we ask people to do is to pay themselves up in the pension process so that we can make sure to make whole all of the people who've been appointed here over the years. There's no more cost other than that. Currently, we have had, in the Rio, Texas conference, we have had 68 churches that have made the decision to leave. I will say, for the most part, in fact, overwhelmingly, those churches have been small and rural, overwhelmingly. We expect there will be a smattering more before we're done with this process, but probably not very many more. One of the things that the Lewis Center, which is a study center under the and provides information about churches. The Lewis Center has been watching disaffiliation and doing a study on disaffiliation. The Lewis Center studies have found that overwhelmingly disaffiliation has occurred in the South, overwhelmingly in churches with white male pastors. I'm not sure what that means necessarily, but that's what the data is right now. I will say that, and I think Andy can add to this, we are those of us who are committed to remaining United Methodist. This is a very interesting time because on one hand, there's a great deal of sadness in the church. I can tell you that the bishop will tell you that he is heartbroken over this process. I think his heartbreak comes a lot from the fact that there's been an extraordinary amount of misinformation passed around about the process and about the split, and that's hurtful. On the other hand, I will tell you, this is an exciting time in the church. Sometimes I think you have to be kicked a little in order to get up stronger, and I think that's part of what's happening right now in the United Methodist Church. And Andy can add to this, but at the annual conference this year, there was a sense of, as United Methodists from all over South Texas gathered together in Corpus Christi, there was an incredible sense of excitement about the future of the church, an incredible sense of all of the things that we're doing in the United Methodist Church all over the district. There are new people coming, there are new ministries starting, and there are wonderful things going on. And that's exciting. So we have this sort of dichotomy between the sadness of those people leaving and the excitement about what's possible for the future. So the next thing on our agenda was why stay United Methodist. I'm going to turn over to Andy and let him add if he has anything to the to either the process or kind of where we are, and also why stay United Methodist.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm sorry I'm having trouble with this microphone. I do want to add what's happened let you know what's happening in the Capital District. I believe that Emmanuel is the 9th. There's 40 churches there were 40 churches in the Capital District. I think Emmanuel is one of only 9 that have been officially in the discernment process. And 4 have voted to disaffiliate. And those are Dripping Springs and Driftwood, both in Hays County, Lampasas, and Burnett in the Hill Country. Those are the 4 that have voted to disaffiliate. There have been a couple that have had the votes and have and decided to remain United Methodist. There's 3 that I know of that have not officially, that are still in the discernment process. And so none of the churches that have disaffiliated are in the city of Austin. You may have caught that. They are in the Hill Country, the ones that have voted to disaffiliate. In our conference, about 80%, it may end up being 75% of our churches are remaining United Methodist. So our conference is still strong, and I'm proud to be a part of it. I'm proud to be a United Methodist. I've got 2 adult kids and 3 grandkids, and I'm batting 500. One of my kids is very active in a United Methodist church and is raising one of my granddaughters as a United Methodist, and I'm very glad about that. The other one doesn't seem to have much interest in church, and I don't know why, but that's about par for the course. Amen. I so wish it wasn't. But one of the reasons that I'm remaining a United Methodist and why I want to stay a United Methodist is diversity. We need each other, and we need to be a diverse church. Most of the churches that have disaffiliated are joining the global Methodist Church. And I've debated about whether I would bring this up, but I'm going to. About 2 weeks ago, the Mid-Texas Annual Conference of the Global Methodist Church, and that's what covers the central and south part of Texas. That's what all of the churches that are from the Rio, Texas, that have joined the GMC are now part of the Mid-Texas Conference. A couple of weeks ago on Facebook, they posted some photos from their annual conference session. And one of the photos was of their presiding elders. They're doing, it's not a bad system, actually. They have, I think they're going to have 27 presiding elders in their conference. This is elders in the church, pastors, elders ordained in their church that have oversight responsibility for a cluster. Each has a responsibility for a cluster of churches, okay? Not a bad idea. They had 22 of them in the picture. It was 19 white men and 3 white women. I'm just saying that was the picture. They also listed 5 people that were not in the picture, and that included an Asian man and an Asian woman and 1 Hispanic woman. So there's. I'm proud of the diversity in the Rio, Texas Conference and in the United Methodist Church. Our cabinet in the Rio, Texas Conference is 3 white men, 2 Hispanic men, and 1 Hispanic woman. There's not enough women on the cabinet right now. The bishop knows that, and that'll be corrected. And, oh, yes, thank you. And an African American, my friend Marcus. Thank you, Kevin. I mean, that's the makeup of our conference leadership of the cabinet of the Rio, Texas Conference. Diversity is important. It's a value in the United Methodist Church. And so that's to me, that's one of the things I want my children and grandchildren to be in a church that's diverse. And also not just diverse ethnically, but also diverse theologically. We are still going to have traditional and conservative congregations in the Rio, Texas Conference and in the United Methodist Church. And our traditional pastors, our traditional churches can reach people for Christ that our what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say liberal. Progressive, thank you. That our progressive churches can't reach. And our progressive churches can reach people for Christ that our traditionalists can't reach. We need each other. We need each other, and we can be in communion with each other.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. And I think that's incredibly important, that the United Methodist Church has always been a big tent church. We have, and I've said this to my congregation, and I think this is sad in this division that we're happening right now. The people who sit around me, I don't know whether the people who sit around me are conservative or progressive or liberal or Democrats or Republicans, and I don't care on a Sunday morning. I have never cared. And the idea now that somehow we should split ourselves into camps with progressive camps and conservative camps is something from a church standpoint that I've never understood. And I'm proud of the fact, as Andy said, that the United Methodist Church is going to continue to be a big tent church. We are going to continue to have lots of conservative congregations. I have a good friend of mine who is a leader in a very conservative congregation, and they have had, they didn't actually go into the discerning process, but they had an internal discussion, and they said, there's a place for us in the United Methodist Church, and we want to remain in the United Methodist Church, and they are. And we can have, again, conservative, moderate, progressive churches that all work together. One of the things I think, and I think this is a question that people might ask later, is if the discipline changes in the future and the discipline allows gay marriage, will we have to have gay marriage? The answer to that is no. That nobody's going to make a church do something that the pastor and the church do not necessarily want to do. So, yes, sir. I think that's a very good question. I think, and Andy, I'll let you answer it, but I think you could get together and make that decision as a congregation. This is, ultimately, this is your building, and you can have some direction to the pastor as to what happens within this building. And so those are the kinds of decisions that you can make. If you don't, and the same thing, this has always been the case. The same thing is if you don't want to marry convicted felons, that's your decision to make. You can set those kinds of rules, and you're going to be able to set those kinds of rules in the future on an individual church basis. Well, that's for you to decide that. Okay, so the question Elizabeth answered is whether that would be the church council or whether that would be the congregation. And again, you guys have to decide that. From the standpoint of the United Methodist Church, we expect people to follow the discipline, but at the same time, and again, Andy can attest to this. I have been involved in the United Methodist Church for more years than I can count now. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I have never one time ever in my experience of being involved in the church had a district superintendent or anybody from the conference walk in the door and said, you have to do this. That has never happened to us. And I think it rarely would happen.
That's exactly right. We've not dictated those kind of things, and you'll have to work out for yourselves how if you want to make us take how you want to practice your faith.
Yes, sir. So that's another good question, and I want both of us to answer this, because the reason is Andy has sat for a long time on the cabinet, and Andy's been actually in the room making those kinds of decisions with the bishop about who goes where.
Yeah.
I will tell you my perception of that is that, and I've heard the bishop talk about this, the bishop is not going to send somebody somewhere where they're not welcome. And so if the bishop knows that a congregation would not be open and welcoming to a gay pastor, the bishop is not putting somebody in that circumstance. It just wouldn't. It wouldn't be an appropriate thing to do. But
That's
Andy?
exactly right. The greatest discernment is used, and we always try to match the pastors to the congregations, and so it would be very unlikely for a gay pastor to be appointed to a church where there was not a pretty good idea that they would be accepted and successful in their ministry. It'd be very unusual.
And I think I would even take that a little bit further. Is my experience as I watch appointments is that the cabinet, the group of people, and by the way, just so you know from a term stand, the cabinet is the bishop and the district superintendents from all the various districts that exist in the conference. And they sit together and they make these appointments. But when they make appointments, the desire is to put people where both the congregation and the pastor are going to be comfortable. So they're not going to put a very conservative pastor in a very progressive congregation. Again, that's just something that doesn't work. And Andy can also add to this, is that I can tell you that the conference office and the bishop have enough trouble day to day without purposely sticking somebody where they're going to have more trouble. I mean,
That's well said. That's well said.
So one of the things that we have on the agenda that I want to move to is connection. United Methodist Church is a connected church. And I think the power of connection is an important thing. And that comes out in a number of ways. We literally, there are United Methodist missionaries all over the world. That's an amazing thing. Some years ago, this was about the time we had the war in Afghanistan, I just happened to be reading the paper. I think I was reading, actually, I saw an article in the New York Times, and there's this young man all dressed in Afghanistan garb, and he's standing on the top of the hill in Afghanistan, and and the article said he's like 22, 23 years old, and he is a United Methodist missionary in Afghanistan in the middle of a war. To me, that was extraordinary. It gave me goosebumps as I stood and looked at that picture and the bravery of that person doing that. In addition to that, many of you know about UMCOR. Many of you provide money to UMCOR. UMCOR provides disaster assistance, again, all over, maybe all over the world. I know certainly all over the United States. I can tell you absolutely they will be in Maui. By the way, I ask for your prayers. If you saw online, the Maui United Methodist Church burned down in the fire. I don't know where they gathered this morning for service, but I hope you'll keep them in your prayers with all of the people in Maui right now. But connection has a tremendous power among us. You are a family here, but you are part of a greater family in the United Methodist Church.
That's right. Wesley nurses, hospital systems, university systems, seminaries, all of that. Almost all of those are remaining United Methodist. We're a very strong connection. And another question that has come up frequently is, well, if with these churches leaving, does that mean our apportionments are going up? And the answer is no. That's part of the adjustment, part of the reasoning for the disaffiliating churches to pay be current on their apportionments plus pay one more year is to order to give us a buffer to be ready, not a surplus, but to be ready for that. We've already decreased the conference overhead, if you will, a conference staff. When I came on as a district superintendent, right before I came on, we had 7 district superintendents. At the time I came on, we had 6. Now we have 4. And so the conference is decreasing its spending, and that's in large part because 20% or so of our church, churches have disaffiliated, and so the budget's going to be there's going to be fewer of us, but the budget's also going to be smaller.
So yes, sir. We haven't counted them by Rio Grande Conference, but I know in the Valley, there have been a number in the Valley that have disaffiliated.
I don't think there's a lot in the rest of the conference, but I think in El Valle there are a few.
So what we wanted, and again, we want to, first of all, I appreciate your questions because that's why we're here. And we want to take more questions from you. One of the things that has happened is we've gotten a number of questions from other meetings like this, and so I wanted to be sure to answer some of those questions with you. One of the things that we find is that sometimes when people from the other potential denominations that are trying to get you to disaffiliate, they have, frankly, there's been a great deal of misinformation out there, is the best way I can say it. But one of the things that they have told in meetings similar to this meeting is that the theology of the United Methodist Church is changing. I have a theory about that. My theory is that they don't like to talk about the same-sex issue because that makes them appear anti-gay, and they don't want to appear anti-gay. So instead of that, they say, oh, it's a theological change in the United Methodist Church. I can tell you both, let me talk both kind of in my role as trustee and also personally. In my church, I see none of that. I haven't seen any of it. And in my role as the chair of the trustees, I have similarly seen nothing like that. Not even a proposal to do that. It's my belief that the United Methodist Church will continue to believe in the Trinity, to make the same affirmations that we have historically made in the United Methodist Church, and that I do not see those kinds of things changing. I do not see a theological change.
That's correct. The articles of religion will remain the same. That's in the front of the Book of Discipline. The doctrinal standards, the Bible as the primary source of our faith, that is not changing.
Did you have a question? So, I'm sorry, you moved your hand.
It's not an option.
Yeah. I guess a couple of things. One of the things that we've also heard is the most recent annual conference of the Rio, Texas conference had made some change that affected everybody. I can tell you we did not. I was there for the full 3 days. Andy was there for the full 3 days, and we did not. We did approve a number of disaffiliations. We've had actually 2 meetings this year to approve disaffiliations. Those meetings went extraordinarily smoothly. Those churches did what we asked them to do as part of disaffiliation, and we fulfilled the promise on our side, and we prayed over them and let them go with grace. And that's sort of where that is. It's a sense of sadness, but a sense of letting them go and continue their faith journey. Let me say one thing about voting, too, because I think that that's important. We have seen a number of things happen that and again, this is just observations, and I'd appreciate Andy's, a number of things that we have seen happen with voting on this issue. We have had a number of churches that have, when they have disaffiliated at basically 100% of the congregation. It has not been a controversial issue for them. To be honest with you, I don't, as someone who's staying in the United Methodist Church, I don't understand that. I don't understand necessarily the argument for it. But overwhelmingly, they made the decision. We have seen some churches where you have much more of a split, where you have conservatives and you have progressives, and you have a 50-50 or a 60-40. I will tell you, and this is just something for you to be thinking of, I would strongly, strongly urge you not to vote if you're going to be 50-50 or 60-40 or, I mean, honestly, it's hard enough to be in church and part of a worshiping community as it is without knowing that you're 50-50 divided. In those kind of circumstances, in fact, honestly, those kind of circumstances are going to kill some churches. Because what's going to happen in those circumstances is either the conservative side, whoever loses, the conservative side or the liberal side or the progressive side, is somebody's going. And as you know, it's hard enough to keep the doors open nowadays. It's hard enough to do all the things you need to do. And if you find out that 50% of the people are on the other side, that's not a helpful thing to keep a church together. Yes, ma'am, in the back. Not at our recent annual conference? No. We don't. In fact, we don't make changes in the discipline at our annual conference. Yeah. Well, I take that back. There was a resolution.
There is a petition. There are going to be probably many petitions to the General Conference, and the progressives. There is a petition going around among the Rio, Texas Conference, initiated by some progressive members that said we're calling for the General Conference to remove the language in the Book of Discipline that we're talking about. To remove that language. It was not a motion to the floor of the Rio, Texas Conference. It was simply, there's this petition. If you want to sign it, it's there. And a lot of people did, and a lot of people didn't. But it was not brought to the floor of the Rio, Texas Conference. It was not acted upon in any way. There'll be lots of petitions to the General Conference, but there's not going to be one from the Rio, Texas Conference, at least not from 2023. We didn't do that. So, is that helpful?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Andy.
I want to just say the thing about voting again. You don't have to have a vote in your church. If you do decide that you want to have a church conference, Reverend Freeman will authorize that for you. He'll come and preside at your church conference. So if you decide you want to do that, you can do that and have a church-wide vote. I would re-emphasize what my friend Kevin just said, is that unless you have a pretty good idea that it's going to be a majority to vote for disaffiliation, I sure would think twice about calling for that, insisting on that vote. It just, voting in that kind of a situation just makes losers. There's no winners. There's no winners. There's just losers. Unless you're of one mind. If you really think that your congregation is of one mind, then maybe it's the right thing. Maybe you do need to bring it to a vote. I would just really caution you on that.
Along those same lines, we have a number of places, in just a second, we have a number of places across the conference where we have new worshiping communities starting. And those new worshiping communities are growing out of areas where there has been disaffiliation. Because where there has been disaffiliation, we have people who are on the losing side of that, and they want to remain United Methodists, and so they have gathered with other people of like mind and are starting new worshiping communities. And to be honest, that's an exciting thing to be happening, and we have it happening in several different places across the conference. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. Yes. That- yeah. First of all, I think that's an absolutely wonderful question. And I will say the discernment process is yours to decide what it is. I mean, you did not have to invite us today. You could have had this discussion among yourselves. You decide on these meetings what's best for you. I will tell you that I appreciate that question. I think that would be a joy to have as part of it, to have someone come and speak to you about the concerns on that side. I certainly think, particularly on the side of the gay and transgender community, there's a real fear of being alienated from the church. I mean, there's a fear already that they are marginalized, and now they're marginalized in some cases from the church that they love. And so I think that's a great suggestion, but it's up for you all to decide whether that's something that you want to do. I heard a phrase a long time ago, I think, that goes with that, and that's that don't talk about us without us. And I think that rings true in this sort of circumstance. But yes, sir. Yeah, I will say honestly, we didn't decide not to vote. Our administrative board. We have had not a discernment meeting, but we had a general meeting of the church to talk about the issue, to talk through the issue, and the administrative board has decided that honestly that it's just too divisive in our church, and we're not going down that path. We to be quite honest with you, I think in my church what you have to do to affiliate is have a 2/3 vote. We would not get a 2/3 vote in my church. But having said that, there are probably, and this is again just solely my opinion. Other people in my church might feel differently. I think there is a strong, very conservative element of my church who would be very displeased if we voted. And honestly, I have no desire at all to alienate those people. Those are many people like the woman who just spoke who have been members of our church for 20, 30 years. They're the backbone of our church in many cases. And I would hate to see us alienate them in a process of voting. Yes, you have.
You have.
No, you do not have to vote. You can. And the other thing is, you can exit the discernment process anytime you want. You can have one meeting and exit the discernment process. If you have to proceed, if you wanted to disaffiliate, you have to proceed through the 3 meetings, but you do not have to have a vote. That's up to you guys as to whether you do that or not.
That's correct. You ask your district superintendent to call a church conference once you've followed the process, and then at that time. But you could opt out also. Elizabeth?
know if we say that this is what we're going to get. If we go global, this is what we're going to get. If we become independent, this is what we want to get. Then the church, I think, we would go with every word as far as global.
Well, let's talk about that. If they've heard, the question was is that we don't know enough about independent or global to make any kind of a decision. Let me first mention independent. Independent is exactly what it says. You're off on your own. You're no longer connected to a greater church. You'll no longer have an appointed pastor. You're out of the conferences, all of the conferences programs. You're out of the pension program. You're out of the insurance program. You're out of all of the things that the conference would provide to you. I will also say, right now, this is a complete aside, but the district actually has lots of money stuck away for promotion of Hispanic ministries that I would strongly encourage you to take some time to look at. Good. Because I think that's it hasn't been used in the way it needs to be used, and so I want to encourage you to do that. But anyway, that's what independent means. Independent means you're off. You're doing your own thing. In terms of global, to be honest, Andy and I are probably not the best people to tell you about global. But I will, Andy, you can tell the bishop's current direction about global.
There's been so much recruitment by the Global Methodist Church in United Methodist Churches that the cabinet a statement that that United Methodist Church should not host meetings of the global, to bring in someone from the Global Methodist Church. You need, I've been out of this for 2 months. So I haven't looked at that in a while. So you need to look and see exactly, and Dr. Freeman can help you, Marcus can help you to see exactly what that says. But so much recruitment going on, and we finally got to the point where we said, we wouldn't allow a Baptist church to come in here and recruit you to become Baptist. We're not going to let this other denomination do that as well. So you can get the information, but you need to do the research. You need to do the research, and it won't be hard to do. They have a very good website, and there are people that you all can talk to, but you are asked not to host a meeting for the Global Methodist Church in your United Methodist Church.
And one of the big pushes along that regard, I just might tell you, is that one of the things that's been hard. I said when I started this out, I said if you would hear the bishop, the first thing the bishop would tell you is that he's heartbroken, and he's not heartbroken over people leaving necessarily. He is, but he's more heartbroken over people leaving after having been told really incredible amounts of misinformation. And that's not only happening in our conference, it's really happening all over the country. In one, I think it was in Florida, Georgia, I can't remember why, there was actually a lawsuit where they stopped discernments. And the specific reason they stopped these kinds of meetings was because of the amount of misinformation that had been passed out to other congregations. So, that's an important part. Yes, ma'am. Right. The Cross and Flame is not the right.
You'd have to remove the United Methodist Cross and Flame.
Right. The Cross and Flame. The Cross and Flame is the logo of the United Methodist Church, and the Cross and Flame would come off.
Now, I'm going to say one thing and that is, we do not have a squad that's going to come in and take away your hymnals. You may still use your United Methodist hymnals. You do not have to put duct tape on the front of it over the United Methodist logo. That's not going to happen. However, You may no longer call if you were to vote to disaffiliate and follow the rules, follow the discernment pathway, and be approved by the annual conference for disaffiliation, you would have to remove the United Methodist from your name and remove the cross and flame from your exterior and from any communications.
You know, one of the things I might tell you is, as the Board of Trustees, one of the things that we're responsible for is we close churches that are small and the congregation dwindles down to be unable to take care of itself. One of the first things that we do when we close a United Methodist Church is to take down the cross and flame, because that's no longer an active part of the United Methodist Church. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. You had another question? You can look it up if you look it up on the web, it's kind of a circle, but it's on the web. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think that's a really excellent question. And again, I'm going to let Andy jump in here. My sense, yeah, I would say my sense from being my time on the Board of Trustees is that we would certainly, and I may be stepping over my authority here, but I think we would certainly welcome people back who wanted to come back. Now, I will say the only difference I will say is we are in active dispute with some congregations. And so, for example, we have some congregations who want to leave and don't want to pay their pension, for example. That's incredibly offensive to me, that you've had pastors assigned to you for years and years, and you might have 4 or 5, 6 people who are retired, and you don't want to make your pension contribution to make sure you're up to date with those people. I think that's terrible. I would have a problem with those people coming back unless they were willing to, take care of what they owed. There are, to be quite honest with you, there are some disaffiliating congregations who want to walk off and leave the cost of their disaffiliation to your church and to my church and to Andy's church, and we're trying very hard to keep that from happening. And those I would have a problem with, but in general, I would welcome people back into the fold of the United Methodist Church.
Sometimes they say it's the pastor's church and he can say what he wants to do, and you don't have to say. So 6 months down the line, we're like,
well, first of all, that there's a bunch of questions in that, but the one is what if we stay and 6 months from now we're still not happy? One of the things that we have, and this is also some misinformation. There's a lot of people who are saying you have to do this before the end of the year. That's not true. We are waiting to see also what happens at General Conference in 2024. We expect that there may be people who may want to make a decision after General Conference in 2024. I would not be surprised by that. There is not necessarily a timeline in this. There is a provision in the discipline that will expire at the end of this year, and so some people are rushing because they think that provision of the discipline is what they have to use. But the bishop and the Board of Trustees have both said no. We have another provision, and if you want to go in 2024, we'll use the other provision and we'll still work it out with you. So that there is no time deadline in this. But let me mention another thing, because Elizabeth said this is the pastor's church and the pastor can do whatever the pastor wants. And now this will be great because Andy and I'm the lay person and Andy's the pastor side of this, so we can have a discussion about this. I have spent many years as the chair of my administrative board, and I have deep respect for the pastors that have been appointed to us. But at the same time, and I don't mean this in a bad way, they're itinerant. They oftentimes come and go. We stay there. I think the lady in the back said she'd been there 40-some years. We as the membership are the backbone of the church. And we have options. I mean, if we are unhappy with the pastor, the first thing we can do is go to the district superintendent and have a discussion with the district superintendent. And as Andy will tell you, I feel sorry, that's the job of district superintendents on one hand, is to deal with those kinds of places where people are unhappy with the pastor or where the pastor's leading them.
That's exactly right. The pastor has a great deal of authority, but not ultimate authority. And that the book of discipline must be followed. And there's always a mechanism for talking to the district superintendent and working those things out. Sometimes the way they have to be worked out as the pastor moves on. But that's the way, that's our Methodist way. I saw your hand first.
Yeah. So that's actually a really great question. So in disaffiliation, the land goes to you, and you make the decision. But I will say that's no different than where we are today. Just so, because this is really important. Today, if for some reason this congregation were to disband and go off somewhere, then this land reverts to the United Methodist Church because you were a United Methodist congregation. But as long as this is an active congregation, you make the decisions about this land. Now there is I will say there is an approval process in that. In other words, the people in Andy's shoes give some approval to that. And as a board of trustees, we'd like to know what's happening. But one of the things we're doing is we're excited about people who want to try new things. So if for some reason you found a different location or a different use of this land, and you had a plan to do that, to be honest with you, as a conference, we would help you. We would be excited about what you wanted to do. One of the things that's interesting to me, and this is part of my role on the board of trustees, and I think this relates to you all, is that one of the things that we have found over the last, particularly the last 20 years, is we've honestly closed a lot of churches. The Methodist churches, like the Presbyterians and the Lutherans, we have, as a Protestant denomination, we've been in decline, and so we've closed churches all over the place. And historically, one of the things that we did was just sell property. I mean, if you closed, we just sold it. I can tell you we're not doing that anymore. Now, we may be doing that in rural areas because that's not a problem to buy property back. But in urban areas, we're trying to find new ways that we can use that property for either mission use or hang on to it or do something that benefits the greater church. A couple of examples of that, we closed a few years ago Parker Lane. We have done a long-term lease of that property to Foundation Communities, and they're building affordable housing on it. And we're going to have free office space for 99 years on that site. Many of you know where Faith United Methodist Church used to be on South Lamar. That's an extraordinarily valuable site, and we're looking very carefully at kind of how that site gets redeveloped over the next 10 years. If for some reason in the future you decided that you wanted to do something different here, whether you want to rebuild here or you want to rebuild somewhere else, or you want, whatever it is you want to do. First of all, that's your decision. We're not going to push it. We're not going to get involved in it unless you ask us. And if you come to us and ask us, then we're going to be able to tell you this worked here, that worked there. These are great people to work with. So we would absolutely be excited about being a resource to you in that. Maybe that was too long an answer.
Yes, sir.
First of all, again, great questions. You are absolutely right. Nobody's going to force you to do anything. You know, this has been a United Methodist congregation. You know, many of you, I assume you know this, but this was the first Methodist Mexican church in 1891. I mean, not necessarily on this site, but that was a predecessor to where you are today. So you have a long history, 130 some years in Methodism. But nobody's going to tell you beyond what the discipline is, which you already know. Nobody's going to set the theological boundaries for you. I mean, if you go into, let me mention if you go independent, because that's also a great question. We've actually had several churches that we've kind of followed that have gone independent over the years. And one of the things that they've done is they've had trouble finding pastors once they've gone independent. And oftentimes they've hired somebody who hasn't even been through an ordination process. I don't know how many of you know, but the Methodist Church ordination process is long, incredibly long. But that's a good thing. I mean, because when you get an appointed pastor here, you get somebody who has been through a process and has been vetted, and so there's a certain degree of confidence that they have the theological knowledge to walk up here and stand at that pulpit. When you're independent, that's a much harder thing to figure out. Can't use the cross and flame. They can use the cross. They can't use the cross and flame. Right.
1968.
Yes. It was the
Episcopal Methodist, well, it was the Methodist Church. Before that, it was the Methodist Episcopal Church. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can use the cross. They can't use the cross and flame.
This symbol that's on this Methodist cross and flame is copyrighted, and they cannot use that symbol.
Yeah. I one of the things, and have any of you all ever been a delegate to the annual conference? Any of you ever been it? Some of you have been delegate to annual conference. Well, one of the things that you know if you have been a delegate to annual conference is that there is a deep respect in the Rio, Texas Conference for the fact that we are a diverse church with tremendous involvement of the Hispanic community. And at General Conference, much of General Conference is in both Spanish and English. And I will tell you, I may be wrong, but I will bet you that we are the only conference in the country that you will see that. I would bet that.
Bishop Schnase says we're the only bilingual United Methodist Conference. I trust him, so I assume that's correct. I don't know if we had a Korean one at annual conference. We do have a couple of Korean congregations. Now the general conference, yeah. You have a question?
I will say that some people have done paper surveys. Some people have done online, click the box surveys. So there has been some of that. The other thing is that what some people have done is just done a general kind of going around getting a sense of the congregation without having anybody write anything down. And I think that in itself has been, pretty effective. And I don't know how many of you break into Sunday school classes, but some churches have had, this is kind of interesting to me, but one of the things we also find is that people tend to gravitate toward a Sunday school class that's, oftentimes either more progressive or more conservative, and so they've gauged it through Sunday school classes sometimes.
Yep, some have done online surveys that are anonymous. They verified that the people filling out the survey were church members, but then the results are anonymous.
And you raise another question. One of the things that's really, really important is if you do a survey or if you have a vote, that a vote has to be people who are on the rolls. And there have been some allegations in some of the votes that people have been actually brought in to impact the vote. That's a very, very sad circumstance, but there's been some suggestion that that's happened.
So I'm going to move us forward. What do we do next? There is a document. It's in English and in Spanish. I hope you all about it. When I was here before, I told you about it. It's called the Discerning Pathways document. It's got a better name than that, but if you go on the conference website, riotexas.org, it's easy to find the stuff about discernment and disaffiliation. And then there's the Discerning Pathways document. And it spells out the steps that have to be taken for disaffiliation. It explains about the vote that has to happen. It explains about the vote that might happen. It has information about how do we change the real estate and do the deed of trust if we decide to disaffiliate. It's got all that kind of information, and it's got some things that you have to do as a congregation. So you either need to designate a committee or your church council or something like that to take these steps and to answer these certain questions. But you also need to be having these conversations. within your church. I would suggest you do it in kind of a formal way, to have these conversations and to say, where are we? Why are we even considering disaffiliating from the United Methodist Church? Put it all out on the table and talk about it and pray about it. Pray over it. And you need to know how much it's going to cost. That the Nan at the conference office can tell you exactly on any given date. She can tell you exactly what it's going to cost. Your apportionment calculation, you got to be current on your insurance, all of that, and the unfunded pension liability. Nan can tell you exactly what that is. So that's your next step, is to do that research and have those conversations. Yes, sir?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And if somebody tells you different, they're wrong. If you close, only if you close. Well, so that's a great question. To be honest with you, this church has been here for so long, I don't know. So, but ultimately, most of the time, the way those work is that property is held most of the time by the local church, but it is subject to a trust clause, and the trust clause basically says, so you hold it in trust for the Greater Methodist Church, and that's the conference, and that's why when you close, it comes to us to make some decision about it. I honestly have found, I think that's a wonderful thing, and partly it is, as we close these churches, this even happens in urban areas, because I can tell you it's happened in Austin. When we close these churches, people are gone. I mean, literally, they go. We have this building, and it's our responsibility then to figure out what to do with it and to take care of it. Now, sometimes like in your case, you're on a very valuable piece of property. We have lots of churches, and Andy knows this too, that we close that by the time we sell it, it's cost us more money to board it up, keep it safe, take the stuff out of it, than we got out of selling it. But that's the responsibility of us as a conference to take care of those properties. We don't just walk away from stuff that's sitting there. We don't do that. We take care of it. And so anyway, I hope that answers your question.
So I would anticipate a couple of months down the line, you would talk to Dr. Freeman and say, we're ready for our second listening session. And at that second listening session, you need to report to him what you've found out. Report to him the progress you've made on the discernment process and checklist. Report to him the conversations that you have had and where you think your church is, and then you can and you'll do another question and answer kind of thing at that time, and then decide by the third session, another month or two down the road, you'll decide whether are we still in this discernment process, do we want to go forward and have a church conference. Dr. Freeman might let you make the third listening session, might let you turn that into a church conference and do the vote at that time. He might decide you haven't done enough discerning and you need this third session, and then we'll go forward. So that'll be his call. But you've still got two more of these meetings ahead of you, plus a church conference probably.
And Yeah, if you want.
it.
And the administrative board at any time can say, look, we've decided we don't need to be in this process anymore.
And that's how we've done it. We've allowed your church council or administrative council, whatever it is you call it, we've allowed them to speak on behalf of the church now. So don't do it without the church, without consensus. But if a church has decided we are happy to remain United Methodist, and we want to end the discernment process, we get something in writing to your district superintendent from your church council chair.
One of the other things I might just, as we close up, to say, and Andy and I, I'm sure, will be here for a couple minutes as we walk out the door if you have other questions. But as you go forward, one of the things you might consider in your next process is there are some wonderful videos, basically from both Bishop Snazy, who is our bishop, and Bishop Sines, who is the bishop in Dallas. And Bishop Sines actually comes out of Rev.Andy City in the Valley. That's where he was born and raised. And both of them have some really excellent videos. They're on the conference website. They talk about being a United Methodist, and I'd encourage you to look at those. They're both very, very well done. Pastor, would you mind? I'm sorry, a couple questions.
Two more hands up. I thought you were the woman first.
Yeah, we have taken the position, I think, again, we could work with the district superintendent on that, but we have taken the position previously that you have to be present to vote. But again, I think we could talk to the district superintendent and talk about that. Again, the problem with that is we want to be careful that we don't end up with a lot of people who haven't been to church in 10 years, and all of a sudden they say now they're an active member. Yes, sir.
Not in Rio, Texas. It's possible that it's happening in the west. Yes.
Okay.
But not here.
Pastor, would you mind praying us out?
Does anyone have any questions in regards to the disaffiliation, or if you have any questions? We want to make sure that you leave at least knowing enough to the point where, as we come to the next meeting, you can also just continue writing down your questions. And what I hope to have in the next panel, when we do have our next meeting, is maybe like a week before, submit all the questions necessary for the speaker who comes, so the speaker can have ahead of time what these questions are and have the best answers for you. Because sometimes it's like the aha questions and then aha moments where I finally got you, and no, I don't like that. I don't like to be blindsided. And I don't think they were. I think they were very knowledgeable in the areas and where they're presenting, which is great. And I thank everyone for chiming in and sharing what you feel in the direction of that Emmanuel needs to go. But again, as your pastor, and I've been here for about a year, I've come to love this church, and I'm here to support you in prayer. I'm not going to persuade you in where you need to go. You need to like they said earlier, pastors come and go. You will remain here for the next year, and you're going to see the new generations to come as well. So my hopes for you as a pastor is to guide you and to pray for you as you go through this process. But if you come asking to see, where my heart is, I will let you know. But that's not where I'm persuading you. But that's going to be a one-to-one conversation. And I just pray for each and every one of you as we go through this process, that we pray for one another, because as we heard, this can be very hurtful as we go through it. I seen that firsthand when I was at in Oxford, and we had gone through the first preliminary process of it, and the church decided to write a letter of stance of the Book of Discipline, and they did, and we had 26 families stand up during worship service. and walk out during that worship service. And it's heartbreaking seeing 26 families get up. Our band members, our pianist, families, children. And it was hard because you're making a stance of who the loser will be. And that to me, it's like, okay, how do we measure that? So just pray about that. And that's all I ask, is be in prayer about this. And if you have any other questions, feel free to write them down, because we want to go ahead and address them to send them to Elizabeth. She is a chairperson here for Emmanuel, and she will gather these questions, and then we will submit them to the next person who's coming, and we'll give you ahead of time a lot of additional time to say, hey, we're going to get this person. This person is an expert on this area of the church, or is going to come and speak to us about if we want more in depth of the theological side of it, or more of the trustee side or the finance side. We are going to decide. You all decide what you all want to hear as well. But we're also going to be in connection with the conference to see where our process is, what we need to be going through as well. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap this up? Because I want to see you here next Sunday. I was like, brother, that's it. No, I want to see you here next Sunday. I'm a firm believer. These are growing pains. Growing pains are great because they know they're setting room for new things to happen in our church and our lives as well. Brother? Okay, and that's what we're again. So as you heard earlier, Pastor said, or Kevin had mentioned, even though in our book of discipline it specifically says it's incompatible, it only points out one thing, and so the language that they're hoping to do away with is like, don't point someone else out. Rather, if you're going to do something, is let it be all inclusive. Like, don't call only one sin out. There's many other sins. And so why are we specifically targeting that one sin? And I had one person ask me that question. He says, well, that's a sin. And he says, well, so are many other things. But before you start taking the speck out of someone else's eye, don't forget to look at yours. So we're all guilty of something. And why is it only LGBTQIA? That, I guess, is one of the reasons why they're trying to just remove that language so it not be offensive to any other, because it just points out one person, or one particular sin, should I say. And there's a lot of other sins: adultery, fornication, lying, lust, drugs, and all that. And our discipline doesn't point those things out, but it only points out only one. So how do we keep it inclusive where everyone is welcomed in the church? That's what I think, is what we're heading. Elizabeth, you had a question? Yeah. Well, the Bible, yeah, we can have more studies about that. So if we want to have Bible study here on a particular, because we can stay here all day to talk about that. But if we want to plan a Bible study of what Scripture teaches us, in view of that particular area, we can. But again, you're calling out just one thing, and we've got to be ready to call out everything for what it is, because that's what Jesus did. He just didn't only point out to one thing; he pointed out to everything. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. True. Is where do you draw that line? So where does the line start and where does the line end, I would say? So where does the line start and where does the line end? Does it start only with LGBTQ and it ends with LGBTQ? So again, I'm just saying, I'm being open-minded and trying to, I don't want to point out only one person, because I'm guilty of sin and many other things. And as we all are guilty in many other things, whether we cheat in our taxes, whether we lie, whether we overeat, gluttony. I mean, again, so we're all guilty of something. So the discipline doesn't call me out. It's calling out someone else. And that's what they're trying to remove. Why are they only targeting one group of sin? I think you said that earlier, right?
No, I can't answer that. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know why, but I think it was part of a movement. And
Yeah, somebody said culture, and I think that's right. There was a movement in the country at the time, and I think it was the movement in the country at the time.
So we can have Bible studies. That's a great topic. We can have a Bible study on what is sin and who constitute what sin is. Because I don't want to say, hey, let's have a Bible study on the LGBT. I don't want to do that, because then we're going to have an uproar if it goes out in the community. Look, they're having a Bible study specifically. No, we can have a Bible study or a theological, in-depth study on what sin is and who constitute what sin is. Because I can say what sin is, but is that my understanding what sin is, or is that what God deems what sin is? So again, I would love to have a Bible study on that. But yeah, let's wrap this up. Anyone else? Yes, Brother Martin. Mm-hmm. It already happened. Mm-hmm. And like they shared earlier, I mean, it's not a process that one needs to continue. It's all everyone's decision whether we get a feel and say, hey, we don't need to go through this. Let's just stop it now. We don't want to cause any more hemorrhaging. Let's stop it now, or let's continue because we want to know more. Then that's the consensus of the body. And if the consensus of the body is to continue, then we continue. The consensus of the body is let's just stop and wait till 2024. As your pastor, I will support you in any direction you all choose to go. And as your shepherd, of course, as long as it's in line with scriptures and you're not going to cause me to give a blind eye on one thing. Nope, sorry, that ain't going to happen. But again, as long as you all are happy, this is your church, and I'm here to shepherd you while I'm here. Any other questions before? Yes, Elizabeth?
Vote was taken. It was not what we wanted. Oh, for the viewers. So if we decided that we waited till the vote and then we say, hey, this is not what we want to disaffiliate, we didn't want the conference to come back and say, well, you didn't do the discernment process. So we're just preparing. It doesn't mean we're voting. It just means we're preparing and getting ready. We don't know. We don't know. We may not ever vote. We just don't know what's going to happen. And that was the reason why council, not me, council, we voted to let's start the process just to be ready in case. Because we don't know what if. Well, it's... Well, we're having two more meetings, so it's going to be the same questions, maybe same answers. We are hopefully going to get a Spanish speaking for the 9 o'clock people to come. I've already told them that. So we're not excluding anybody, and we weren't trying to do it behind anybody's back. We were just preparing. That's all we're doing. We're not going to vote tomorrow. We're not going to go vote next week. It's just to prepare what might happen. We don't know. That's it.
Jesus says to love your neighbor as you would love yourself. Thanks for the quiz, the pop quiz. I was like, what is she going to ask me? I was like, that was a good one, easy one, the golden rule. I was like, I passed. I hesitate, A-. Just kidding. True. True. Any questions? Yes, hermana? The people in the committee, well, of course, we have a trustees representation, which would be DJ. He is the chair of the trustees. Then we have the finance director, which would be Ruben. And we have the council chairperson, which would be Elizabeth. We have worship leaders that are there, which would be Sister Hope. We have the representative chairperson of the United Methodist Women, United Methodist Men, the youth. I'm sorry? Of our church. There's about 17 of us. And of course, even anyone who has considered themselves an elder of the church, they can be what's called, what's that right name? It's a member at large. And you can be there. Absolutely. The only meeting in the church that is closed is the SPRC meeting. Any other meeting, everyone is welcome. You can just be there, sit in the back. You won't have voting privileges, but only those in the panel those in the committee can vote. But you can hear and you can still speak as well. Well, once he gets the numbers of what it would cost, not Ruben, but the church, then Ruben can answer that question, because I don't think he has that answer, but only what he knows, what we have in our account, what we would find ourselves. But I think we can call Nan, I'm sorry? We'll get that information. He'll get that information. Send it to me, unless you have Ruben Reese's email address. You can, just send it to me. And we'll send that to Ruben, and then we can have that question as well. So send in your questions, even if we don't have the meeting right away, and if there's one question that, we can find it for you immediately and answer that question, great. It doesn't have to make its way to the next panel unless it's like a question that everyone needs to hear. But it's just like, hey, this is my concern, brother, and that's about it. Last question, anyone? All right. You can go home and take a nap now. All right. Dora's over here. Yeah, it's past my nap time. Would you please stand? Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for today's speakers. Thank you for guiding them. Thank you for their leadership in the church, not only as in the United Methodist Church, but in the Church of Jesus Christ. Thank you for every leader out there in both United Methodist and the Global Methodist. Father, we are here to do your will. Help us, Lord, as we have received this information, that your Holy Spirit guides us and bring forth the knowledge and wisdom we need to know personally. And Father, that we will have a heart and allow, Father God, just for it to first start with us. And help us to be the church that you have called us to be. We are in a perfect setting here at Emmanuel on 35 and Brushy Street, and where we can meet a lot of homeless people, a lot of people in need. And Father, that we can be that beacon of hope in the midst of darkness, that we can be the love that you are calling us to exercise, that we can be your hands, your feet. We can be that water that will refresh and replenish someone's spirit, quench someone's soul, that only Jesus. But who would they know who Christ is if we don't take that message? Let us not forget who we're here as we learn today through the scriptures that when Peter got off the boat, he made his way towards Jesus. I pray that this church makes its way towards Jesus and everything else will fall into place. Lead us, Father God, as this church. Lead us back home where we can find rest. And for those our viewers, thank you for joining us. For those who came from long distance, be careful, be safe. We love you. All this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen.